Hi, I'm Beth Bonness, host of the Thought Echoes podcast, where we explore how we engage with our thoughts and appreciate their entanglements with our pasts, our futures, and with those we love and interact with the most. In this episode, I have a lively conversation with Celine Santini, a passionate ambassador of transformation and an award-winning author of over 50 personal growth books, including Kintsugi, Finding Strength in Imperfection. She uses Japanese art therapy and modern psychology as a way to uncover the hidden beauty within our fractures. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, Beth. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm Céline Santini. I'm a French, you can hear it from my accent. I'm a French author and speaker, and I wrote more than 50 books, but one of my babies, my favorite baby, is indeed Kintsugi, Finding Strength in Imperfection. And I wrote this book in 2018. And before I tell you maybe how I wrote this book, maybe I can define what Kintsugi is for people who don't know. Actually, it's an ancient Japanese art from the 15th century. But for me, it's much more than an art. It's like art therapy. Because when the kintsugi is like when you break a ball and then you have got different solutions. If you break a ball, you can either put it in the trash or you can decide to disguise the repair. But you can go the third option, which would be kintsugi, when instead of hiding the repair, you highlight the scars with pure gold. So that means that paradoxically, the object becomes more treasured, more precious, more stronger also for having been broken. So when I met Kintsugi, for me, it was a perfect metaphor for life. Actually, I met Kintsugi while I was in a very difficult, going through a difficult period, after my second divorce. I was a solo mom, and my mother got suicide a few years before. So it was a very dark journey. And that's when I met Kintsugi. And when I met Kintsugi, I first initially, I saw a picture of a Kintsugi piece with these beautiful golden lines. And I watched these pictures, and instantly I felt like I was getting repaired just watching the piece, because I said to myself, oh my God, this is talking about my own life. These veins, these scars are talking about my own scars. And it was the week of my second divorce. And that really gave me hope, because I said to myself, you know what? You are a resilient person. You already came through these ordeals. You survived. So you will survive again. So for me, kintsugi is, as I said, a metaphor of life, but especially it gives hope, because it reminds you that your journey will be imperfect, that you will always find a solution, and you can gain, which is a paradox, you can gain experience from everything that you go through, and you will bounce back. So that's when I met Kintsugi. At that time, I was a writer, so I spontaneously decided to train myself for the Kintsugi technique. And while I was learning how to do a Kintsugi, I said to myself, there's a story to tell, and I need to write the book that is actually being uploaded right now in my mind. So I needed to give birth to this book. So that's the story.
That's a wonderful, the way that you saw that bowl and then understanding a little bit about the process, but not the whole process. And so, can you talk
Exactly.
about the 6 steps that you kind of
Yes,
walk
that's
through in terms of
thank
the process with Kintsugi?
thank you, Beth. It's actually a very interesting question, because when I first met Kintsugi, as I said, the whole result was very telling for me. That was like an epiphany. But when as I said before, when I tried it, I realized that it's not only the result, which is interesting. It's actually, as you said, the 6 steps. So I identified 6 steps, and each of these steps, at the time I was doing them, I was, It's, you know, they say there are several steps of grieving. And I think it has a parallel with Kintsugi. You go through all these steps and your pain heals regularly, you know, is step by step. So to explain better, the first step is the step that when you break the object that you want to repair. Sometimes it's already broken, sometimes you break it intentionally, which is actually quite interesting too, because you project your pen into the object which will represent your soul. So that's actually when I do workshops, this step is very emotional, as you can imagine, because people project all their pen and all their ordeals into this step. Then after, the second step is when you glue the pieces together and you evaluate the puzzle, like imagining what it will be like when it's finished. And then you try to rebuild the puzzle of your life, which is indeed interesting to see what is missing, what you look like once you are broken. The third step is a step when you have to be patient, which is not my strong, how you say, my strong key. Yes, well, I don't remember how you say in English, but you understand. It's not my strength to be very patient. So that was a difficult step, because once I met Kintsugi, I wanted to do this beautiful piece and put it on my altar, but not like in the next afternoon. I didn't know then that you had to wait a few weeks or a few months, because the lacquer needs time to heal. So it was very painful for me to have to learn to wait, because I'm the type of girl who wants to, you know, tear on the leaves of a plant to make it grow faster. So it's not that efficient. But so that was very interesting for me, this step. And actually, I've met Kintsugi like 8 years ago, but I really feel more and more patient. So it's interesting. The fourth step is when you send whatever is that you need to, you know, the cement, you need to sand it, to polish it so that it's smooth. So it's very interesting, because it symbolizes whatever you want to get rid of in your life, whatever you need to let go. So that's actually very strong too. Then there's this step 5 is when you put a black coat of lacquer to protect whatever you just repaired, because you don't want to you got rid of a lot of things, you don't want them to penetrate again. So that's very symbolic too. How can you now learn to say no, for instance, learn to say no to whatever is not relevant to your life. And the 6th step is when you, on the last layer of lacquer, when it's still moist, it's a bit like, you know, nail varnish, nail polish. When it's a bit sticky, you just sprinkle some golden dust. Actually, it's real gold. So, but it's reduced into powder. You dust it onto the moist polish, and each particle of gold gets into the red and transform the red lines into a wonderful golden line. And actually, I explain it because when I first met Kintsugi, I really thought it was like a melted gold, but actually it's not. Yeah, so it's interesting to know. And then this step obviously is very powerful. Actually, probably the most powerful one is when you suddenly see the result of all your hard work, and you see all these flowing golden lines shining and representing all your story, all of your past, all of your deals, but they have a meaning, and you can embrace it. And yes, you've been imperfect, and yes, you've made some errors, and yes, you have suffered, but seeing it covered with this beautiful golden lines, it means that you have survived 100% of your worst ordeals, and you are still here, and you can have hope for the rest of your life. So for me, it was a powerful process.
And was so delighted to connect with you. This September, my youngest daughter got married,
Mm-hmm.
and I was reflecting on my husband's and I marriage, which we had our 45th wedding anniversary. So,
Mm.
high school sweethearts. So we've been married a
Wow.
long time. But I didn't want to, like with the toast, the traditional toast you do, I didn't want to be looking back in my rearview mirror, giving her advice from somebody who'd been
Mm.
married decades. I was
Mm.
really journaling and reflecting back. I didn't keep a journal right before I got married, so I couldn't go back to my
Wow.
words at, my
Mm.
early 20s. But I was trying to remember what it was like before I married him, and then just all the hope and just, your life is in front of you. And I wanted to kind of get
Mm.
into that space, but holding on to what realizing all the ups and downs, and it's
Mm.
not as if it
Mm.
was all that 17-year-old
Mm.
lasted for the 45 years. So it was kind of
Yeah.
looking at those two spaces. And she studied architecture, but pottery is kind of her creative outlet. And so
Mm.
she discovered, so I had heard of Kintsugi because she had broken a pot.
Mm.
She was moving it with some friends to a pot that she had just had fired, and was moving it to the car. And the
Mm.
friend felt terrible
Mm.
because it fell on the ground. And she had kind of heard about Kintsugi, but hadn't done it. And then
Mm.
when this pot broke, as you said, you can throw it away,
Mm.
and she thought, I'm going to try to do that. So then she
Mm.
researched and found a kit. And so she went through that. And
Mm.
so the concept of having something that's broken and imperfect, but putting it back together and having it become
Mm.
more beautiful, somehow that and her getting married seemed like a
Mm. Mm.
wonderful juxtaposition. So can you
Mm.
share what you told me right before I interviewed
Yeah.
you in terms of what they do with Japanese marriages or now?
That's interesting. It's in small villages. Sometimes they offer a kintsugi piece to the bride and groom. But what is very interesting they actually take the bowl from the village of the bride. The traditional bowl with the traditional decoration, and the bowl the bowl of the groom, and they try to well not they don't try they do it they find a way to cut it in half, each of the bowl, and to mix it together with the kintsugi technique, and they offer it as a symbol, obviously, of the merging of the two souls. And I find this picture so beautiful. I already like kintsugi in general. Actually, as I shared to you confidentially, in a former life, I used to be a wedding planner. So I did it during 10 years. So for me, this symbol is so strong. I would have loved to receive this kind of ball when I got married, and I got married twice.
You would have had two beautiful bowls. Since we talk about on this podcast about our thought echoes and how we're all entangled, can you speak to how having kind of a Kintsugi um, filter as you're operating through life and your relationships,
Mm,
how that can help reframe, especially with
mm,
the U.S. being very polarized, but it's not just in the U.S. Instead of
mm,
throwing out a relationship, so to speak,
mm,
how we
mm.
can take a step back and kind of use that as a lens to how we approach life and our relationships.
Well, the synonym of kintsugi could be resilience. They could be two synonymous. So I really think people who enjoy the kintsugi metaphor are already resilient people in general. That's the common point of this secret club of kintsugi lovers. So I really think that as resilient people, we tend to have a positive mind frame anyway, as a reflex, like as a second nature. So when you have this positive vision of life, you know that whenever something breaks, there's always a solution. You already instinctively know that, and you already apply it. But so when I wrote this book, I said to myself, that's weird, because the only people who relate to Kintsugi are already resilient people. So I said to myself, that's weird, because nobody will want to read a book because they already are resilient, and people who are not resilient would need this book. But then I realized something, is that the resilient people often have something in common, is that they don't care. They care a lot about others, but nobody really pay attention to their own fragilities, because they say, I'm sure you've heard that. I'm sure you are a resilient person if you like Kintsugi. What we hear as a resilient person is often like, oh, you are so strong. Oh, you don't need help. You are so strong. Like, as if we don't need, to sometimes be a bit of softness, a bit of cocoon, to be pampered. So I think Kintsugi is here to remind us that yes, we are resilient, but yes, we also have a right to take care about ourselves. I don't know if it answers your question, but I wanted to insist
Yeah,
on
no,
that.
and I think that's true. And when you talked about the phase, the waiting, and the
Mm-hmm,
six
mm-hmm,
steps, that there's a time to let things set and to
mm-hmm,
wait.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I think as I've interviewed various people, whatever it is in this uncertain time we've got, many people, myself included, want to jump to
Yeah.
a solution and get on with the next thing.
Mm,
And sometimes the next step is to take a
yeah.
pause and be comfortable in the uncomfortableness of not taking that next step
Mm,
right
mm,
away. And that
mm, mm.
somehow in that waiting, you change, or the
Yeah.
question or what you're trying to
Yeah.
fix or whatever, it changes if you give it some space. And
Mm,
so I think that in the fast-pacedness that we have grown to
mm,
operate
mm,
in, that we don't, it's seen as a, oh, you're being lazy, or, why you're just sitting there, or why are you whatever. And so
mm,
that pausing, I think, is something that I am guilty of not
mm,
giving enough time to, and so trying to
mm,
constantly do
mm.
that. So it's interesting that you said that, and in terms of that being difficult for you,
Yeah.
to pause.
I, I want to bounce back on what you just said. I think I said a synonymous of Kintsugi would be resilience. We could also add that another good word would be acceptance.
Mm.
And what you just said, really, I had this word coming through my mind. Um, when we are waiting, it looks from the outside that it's lazy and that it's inefficient. And I used to my favorite word before was to be practical and efficient. It was like quick and efficient. That was my goal in life. But sometimes I will talk about a plant again. When you plant a seed, you have to wait for it to grow. I mean, there's no other way.
Mhm.
So we need to valorizate. Can you say that?
Mhm.
Revalue. Sorry,
Mhm.
revalue the idea of time, and that it's not a waste of time. It's just taking your time,
Mhm.
and that's very difficult for people who are, as I said before, resilient people, strong people, learning to go ahead when they suffer, learning to be strong, to yes, to go on whatever is happening. But we really need to learn how to yes, accept. And as you just said, and it's very interesting, when we are in this time when we have to wait, actually the transformation begins.
Mhm. That it's true. It's true. So you wrote this book, and you've written many, many other books, and all the contact
Mm-hmm.
information will be there, and the picture of your gorgeous book and the vase, and you've got some delightful images.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what you've done? I thought it was interesting within the corporate kind of world, because you often
Yeah.
think of this as, this is self-help kind of off on the personal space, but as we all know, the teams
Mm.
you have in your corporate job. So I'd be interested in how
Yeah.
that's in the efficiency that's, kind of required in the corporate world, how's that morphed?
That's very interesting, because initially I saw myself as a writer. I was writing these 50 books, but suddenly people from the corporate world reach out and ask me for workshops or conferences, or workshops plus conferences for their teams, like Netflix or IKEA or Brother, and from all over the world. So that was very interesting, because it just came without me doing anything. And also I had the same demand for going into to speak about resilience in prison. So that's actually my first workshops were into the corporate or prison world. And it's only recently that I decided to open it to individuals. So that's usually the process is in the other way. So that's interesting, because it means that the corporate world was open to actually integrate self-help for their employees. So that's actually quite new, I think. And we need to speak about the dates, because it's interesting that the book was released in 2018 and internationally 2019. And actually, while I was preparing for interviews, I realized it was just 9 months that before the how you say COVID, the
COVID,
the lockdown. It was 9 months before that my book was released in the whole world. So it's like as if something was in preparation, because obviously we speak more and more of resilience since the COVID area, and we need more and more resilience and kids. So that's how it went. And then now I as I said, now I open it for the individuals. Actually, Kintsugi is so rich, it can be a key for people who suffers from a disability, for illness, for any kind of ordeals. Actually, that's how strong Kintsugi is.
So when you talked about people who are resilient, that they'll come to Kintsugi and kind of shaking their heads like, yeah, I get it, I get it. And those who are more resistant kind of need to be walked through a little bit more how it will benefit them or their families or their, their teams or whatever. So how do you step people into learning about Kintsugi and kind of the steps that they can take to see the rewards?
For instance, when it's an individual coming into a workshop, they are already not familiar with Kintsugi, but they are already sold. They know that it speaks to them. But for instance, the most difficult is when I go into prison, and the prisoner did not choose to be at this workshop. And sometimes they say, Madam, I'm sorry, but it's not relevant for me. I say, okay, but if you are here, just open your mind, and you are there. So, and it's interesting because I usually do it in 6 sessions. And by the 3rd or 4th session, I see they get more and more silent, and they get more and more into it. And at the end, I always do a trick, which is, okay, you mentioned before several times that it doesn't speak to you. Okay, well, you've worked like 18 hours on your bowl, but you say it's not important for you. Okay, let's switch bowls. You will take your neighbor's bowls and vice versa. And they say, no, I want to keep my bowl. Okay, but if you want to keep your bowl, it means that it has an importance for you. So to answer more directly your question, the way I do it is it's a workshop / conference. So that means that there's a theory of whatever step we are in today, how it works like in the tradition of Kintsugi. But then what does it mean for you today? I make them think about their own journey and how it resonates to their journey. And then we do the Kintsugi bowl like manually, like the real manual art. But when you send your ball and you have just thought about whatever you want to get rid of in your life, it's not the same as just doing a kintsugi session, because you are really metaphorically and physically sending whatever you don't want anymore in your life. So that's very powerful, and it's like they are sweating and they are physically involved with their ball. And at the end of each step, we do what I call a ritual of integration, like a symbolic ritual which resonates. Sometimes we use fire, we use water, we use all the five senses to integrate whatever we've done practically and symbolically. We integrate it unconsciously and consciously, and I always use the five senses so that, as you know, when you work with the five senses, the anchor is deeper, the anchor of whatever you integrate. So that's how I work. Yeah.
Delightful. And especially, I didn't realize that you'd done it in prisons. It makes, I mean, that makes total sense. But as you said, they didn't choose to be there. But there may be some corporate team members that are like, okay, my manager is telling me I have to go to this workshop. So there'd be, there might be some parallels with that.
Of
So if you had to
course.
give one piece of advice to people in terms of whether they know about the concept or not, just in terms of a philosophy in life, from all of your working with people in all these different, with all sorts of backgrounds, what would that one piece of advice be?
Well, I like this sentence which says, you have survived 100% of your worst ordeals up until now, because it's a truth. I mean, nobody can say the opposite. So just keep that in mind. And I advise everybody who listens, if they are not familiar yet with Kintsugi, just to watch a piece of Kintsugi, typing Kintsugi on the internet, for instance, and observe whatever happens to you when you just watch it. As it happened to me, because as I said initially, when I first watched my first Kintsugi piece, it was like an epiphany. And then the next step would be to either buy a Kintsugi, but I would advise that you do it yourself because it's more powerful, and ideally with, of course, a guidance as I offer, because like that you can, it's not just a manual art, it's art therapy, and being guided allows to go much deeper. But you can do it yourself, you can do it with a guide. But I think that when you have got this daily reminder of your Kintsugi bowl or plate on your altar every day, you watch it and you say to yourself, oh my God, I am Kintsugi.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. One of the a caveat I'd add when you were talking about the wedding couples and how they take symbolically for the two sides of this new partnership. When I think of relationships, and I'll say casual relationships, obviously my third daughter got married, so that's very symbolic. But there are a lot of relationships, family and friends, that over time there are little chips in the relationships. Some of them are they're not always breaks, they're chips. But there was, and it might have been one of the YouTube talks, or it might have been in the book, or both. But you talked about how something breaks and you look at putting that back together, but sometimes you take a piece from something else and you add it. So that was before the couples, kind of one where that's done purposely. But if you're trying to put something together, and so whether that symbolically is a lesson you learned from something else that you're going to bring to this piece, of you in time. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Of course, I love this step. Actually, yes, sometimes you have got all the pieces, but sometimes one piece might be missing, or too many pieces, and you cannot even do Kintsugi. In that case, as you said, we can take a piece from a totally other object. For instance, there's a picture in my book where they use turtle shell to cover the missing piece, but you can take two different techniques. For instance, a beautiful Japanese bowl with a French gray bowl and you mix it and it's different colors, and it obviously symbolizes the fusion of two different cultures. This technique is called Yobitsugi. And what for me it symbolizes the fact that you might say there's no hope because you miss a complete part of yourself. Sometimes they say that when you are broken, a part of your soul is gone when you have suffered so much. But Yobitsugi symbolizes that there's always a solution, and that you can actually get help and take a little piece of someone else or someone helping you and put it in your own bowl. And I always remind people that maybe there's a little piece of their Kintsugi bowl on the bowl of someone else.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for taking the time, Celine. I really appreciate it.
Beth. It was my pleasure. Thank you, Beth, for reaching out.
All right.
Have a nice day. Bye.
You too. Bye. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of the Thought Echoes podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend. It helps get the word out. Until next time, keep exploring the echoes that shape your world.